Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Strategy Session. I am Rick Wilson, hosting you this evening with Stuart Stevens and the great Joe Trippi. We are 5 o'clock on the East Coast right now. We are waiting with a sense of dread and trepidation as to what's going to happen tonight in Iran, given Trump's 8 o'clock deadline. There are some affirmative signs that it might not happen, that he might not wipe out the civilization as he was bragging yesterday. There are some troubling signs that the infrastructure is all in place to begin another phase of this war. And there are a lot of disturbing signs that Trump has no clue what he's doing or how to escape from the trap he's in, and that it is continuing to absolutely decimate the Republican Party. And I'm using the term appropriately. It is reducing their numbers in ranks. They're being winnowed down like wheat right now because of what's happening. This war is unpopular. This war, especially with independents, in our obsession with independence on this show and other Lincoln Project stuff, we came out of the Republican world. We specialize in those soft independents, those moderate voters in the Republican Party, those conservative voters in the Democratic Party, those indies in the center, and all of those people hate this war. So I want to start with you, Joey. We were talking just before we came on air. What's the scenario that you're thinking about and seeing that might lead us to not go into another very ugly and destructive phase of this war tonight?
Well, the only thing I've heard is the same thing that made the market go from, off the wall to come back in the last 3 or 4 hours. And that was, Pakistan essentially offered Trump an off-ramp of, do a 2-month ceasefire. We convinced the Iranians to open the straits for 2 weeks, a 2-week ceasefire. We put them, get them to let tankers through the straits for 2 weeks as a show of good faith, and you put your attack off for 2 weeks. There were all the sundry, the White House saying that they were looking at the Pakistani proposal and might consider it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So who knows? But that's the only off ramp I saw that it also lets him out of the taco thing, because he can basically do, hey, of course I want to give peace a chance, so I'll delay my attack. But as you were saying, it seems like a lot of things are already in place or on the way, and we'll see if he pulls back or not. But Rick, what do you hear?
Rick, can you run? I thought that was fascinating before we started. You were running down what you're hearing about what's in place. You know a lot about this stuff. You're a DOD guy too.
So right now on ADSB, which is the sort of international transponder thing that monitors traffic, we've got a bunch of B-52s up out of England, out of Lakenheath in England, headed toward the Gulf. The tankers are running the tanker track up and down the Red Sea and over Saudi Arabia. All these aircraft folks have fairly short range, really, when you get down to it. Most of them, actually, the fighters certainly. And these tankers have to go in a big racetrack pattern on 150 miles on a side, and the planes fly up, get more gas, go to Iran and do the mission. Those guys are up. There's a lot of motion right now with C-17s bringing more troops, more cargo into Saudi Arabia, into King Khalid Military City, and into another airbase in Saudi Arabia that's been used repeatedly or hit repeatedly now by Iranian missiles. But I think that there's a lot of moving parts in the machinery right now that if you would set a deadline of tonight for 8 o'clock and you were going to do it, all those parts would be required to be in motion, and they're all in motion. Now, that doesn't mean at the last minute they can't pull the plug on it. And frankly, we should hope they pull the plug on it so we don't escalate it up another notch. But, I think Joe actually struck the real internal here with Trump is the markets were in a free fall today. They were in the markets were in deep trouble today. And I think, so we've got these competing interests here. We've got a head fake taco peace deal versus the momentum of the military being deployed for these attacks. And, guys, I think after this weekend, Trump learned a wrong lesson, just like he learned a wrong lesson out of Venezuela. He saw all this amazing capacity, these incredibly brave special operator types, the pararescue jumpers, all the 160th SOAR airmen, all the other Air Force assets, Navy assets that were brought in to rescue the pilots of the downed F-15E. And with the unbelievable courage and skill of these people, those guys were both rescued. And thank God, right? But I think he now learned a lesson like Venezuela, like, okay, if somebody gets shot down, it's going to be easy. We'll just get them back out. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
This was a long bomb. We lost 4 helicopters. We lost a drone, and we lost 2 out of the 62 active MH-130 special operations planes that we have in the whole inventory. It was a great fear in Trump's mind. And I want to talk to both of you guys about this because I think we have to sort of mentally prepare the country for the next phase of this war if it does escalate. There will be an American hostage or hostages in the immediate future. And I think Trump would have had 1,000 people die to get one guy out. So he doesn't have that dynamic of what happens when there's an American hostage in Iran in this time of war, where it will become the only thing that is covered on television. But I want to talk to you guys about, like, the political implications of this war have already been destructive as hell for Trump, terrible for the GOP. I'll start with you, Stuart. I mean, I think the party is in an absolute free fall right now because of it was hurting because of the economic decisions of the tariffs, and now it's bleeding out on the floor waiting for the EMTs because of this war.
Great images. It can always go back to the Epstein files to get back on track. To get us back. I stumbled into this rabbit hole of a world that you know a lot about, Rick, which is special forces, former special forces operatives who are hosting podcasts. And
yes,
really
there are. Apparently, they all have one.
I know it's really fascinating, and they all seem really smart, really articulate, and funny, and smart, and makes me wish that I knew these guys. But just how unpopular the war was with them, and how they were saying, there was a whole flurry of this, and I was particularly interested because they were doing analysis of what happened in this raid and all this different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they're kind of insider perspective, and just saying, like, do you know anybody who's for the war? They go, no, I don't know anybody who's for the war. Most of, if not all of these guys, I guess probably are veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan because they're of that age. And they say it's just, we haven't learned anything. There's the same mistakes. This isn't why I supported Trump. And just how difficult what they're trying to do will be. Just the reality of it, that, to try to extrapolate that you rescue one person at enormous expense, every cent worth it, 100 times more. But don't think that we can do this. We tried this in Iraq, which is a much smaller country with larger forces.
Oh, yes.
And how'd that work out?
Well,
I just thought that was interesting because if you've lost that special forces base.
Well, he's also lost Alex Jones and Tucker Carlson today, who are both calling him a war criminal.
Wow, I didn't know that. Huh?
Yeah. Well, there's two things. The C-130s run about $100 million each, maybe $8 million, something like that.
Those are special operations versions. They're a little more spendy.
They're even more. Yeah, they're even more expensive. Than that. And then on top of it, so there's a couple $100 million right there, and that's before the choppers and everything else. Et cetera. But also, I think that the number analysts came out today and reported that the American people are spending $850 million a day in higher gasoline prices. In other words, the war tax on gasoline is now calculated to be at $850 million a day. So all these weapons, all these munitions, and everything else that we're doing, the cost to the American people, and I'm talking at home, just making ends meet. And then, so can you, Sam, could you put up that poll again? I just want to relate one thing. So here's the thing that everybody get your head wrapped around. So 59% of the American people think it's gone too far, including, by the way, 63% of independents. My guess is Democrats are higher than that.
Yeah.
About right. So let's think, who is saying about right? The 26%. And then look at that split in that party, because I'm sure most of them are not saying it's gone too far. They're either in the about right or not far enough. And that is the pickle. That is the thing that's tearing that party apart.
Yep.
And you do have Tucker and others saying it's gone too far, shouldn't have happened. But I'm just saying, I'm talking about the people who answered that question. You've got to believe that 39%, remember, we always talk about, gosh, he's got 36% of the country, whatever, that'll do whatever. It's split, and it's an either or. You cannot put that back together by either calling it off or
correct.
You know what I want to know is I want to know who the 13% is, because I want them I want them part of my neighborhood watch. I want them like living down the street. It's like, remember when there was always, Rick, a certain small group that thought that Rudy was soft on crime?
Oh yeah,
in New York City.
100%.
It's like, who are these people? I wonder,
right.
I want them like living in my building, because they're probably like, really well armed sort of folks. Man, those are terrible numbers, and I don't see how you unring that bell quickly,
especially with independents being so damaged for him. And the independents helped Trump get elected president in 2016 and in 2024. That's just a brutal, ugly fact of the matter. And they have turned against him in a degree to which I can't even get my head wrapped around it. Those.
Rick, I think it goes to that's something we talked about a lot, the fragility of that election day coalition of Trump in 2024.
Sure.
It was created by these weird forces, a president who shouldn't have run again, who then, I think when they look back on this, no one's going to say, this idea of having a president, have him get out in July, have the vice president come, that really worked great. We should keep doing that.
Yeah, let's not do that again.
Yeah, that sort of model. So it's sort of a freak election in that sense. I think there's every reason to believe that had it been a normal Trump, if Biden had gotten out after the midterms as he should have, he had a thing, Trump probably wouldn't be president. So, usually the last to join are the first to leave for obvious reasons. They're the ones that have the most doubts about it.
Right.
And, I think we spend far too much time, at least the press does, or the chattering class, talking about the approval ratings of the Democratic Party. I don't think it really matters, but people aren't against Trump because they're for the Democratic Party. Those two are not, there's not a price of admission that says you've got to endorse the Democratic Party if you're against, blowing up desalination plants in Iraq.
Well,
in Iran.
CNN and the other pollsters have suddenly discovered that the double haters actually are voting for Democrats. Like
by 2-1, basically.
Yeah, we spotted that in the November elections in Virginia and New Jersey. We talked about it on the strategy session, that the double haters had broken to Democrats and broken away. Yes, the Democrats may have a toxic brand. Guess what? There's something clearly more toxic, and that was all before the war. So. Let's talk about that. It makes sense logically to me that if you're a double hater, it means you're against the status quo. Yeah. And what do you do when you're against the status quo? You either don't vote or you vote for change. You don't vote to reinforce it. So, I mean, in a kind of human psychology sense, it makes sense. Yeah.
And I think that, folks, the double haters, as Joe was explaining, these are people who don't like either party. And you know who Trump got in 2024? Got the double haters. Yep. Now it is flipped over wildly. And all the coalition, I think, is affected by this war. And I'm sort of thinking about this on the fly. I think the whole coalition is affected by this war for a couple of reasons. One is the sons and daughters who are going to go over there are the sons and daughters of MAGA voters, and they are MAGA voters themselves.
That's a really
they're being put into the firing line by this guy.
Very interesting.
And Trump's family will never one day face an enemy in combat. Never, not one of them will ever face an enemy in combat. The second thing I think that's happening is there's a disproportionate number of Hispanic and African Americans in the military, and that Hispanic coalition and those young African American men that were tempted by Trump in 24 are now also witnessing the same sense that they're the ones on the front line, not the Trump family, not Donald Trump, and they were promised we'd stay out of foreign wars, and we didn't. So I think that there's, and we've got Mike Madrid coming on the Behind the Numbers on Friday with us to talk about Hispanic numbers and the overall polling picture right now, which is shockingly bad, folks. I want to say this: the three of us on this show have probably consumed more polling than every human being on Earth, except for maybe maybe a dozen other people, are more obsessive poll readers than we have been in our careers in the world. I have never seen a portfolio of destruction for the Republican Party like we're seeing now in every poll. Elliot Morris just posted a few minutes ago that Trump is underwater in 135 House seats. That's insane. There are only 25 or so swing seats in the country, but he's underwater in 135 seats. Wow.
I can remember getting a polling briefing from our friends over at Public Opinion Strategies, Rick, and when the numbers were really awful for Bush, and they said in that sort of very serious pollster way, I've never seen numbers like that. And then one of the smart propeller heads that they always brought to these, polling briefings spoke up and said, "Well, there was Bulgaria." Okay.
Yeah, no,
I stand corrected. It's not as bad as the leaders of Bulgaria.
The only thing these numbers are, you can sort of equate maybe, and they're far worse, were Carter's going in the 80 election against Reagan.
Yeah.
They were close to this with independents, but nowhere this bad.
Which goes to Rick's hostage point. Which no one's talking about that, Rick. That's a really interesting angle. How do you see that? You mean hostage like?
I mean, so let's say we have a pilot shot down or an aircrew shot down, and the Iranians get to them before the CSAR guys, the combat search and rescue guys, get to them. People right now have a sort of vestigial memory of the Iran hostage crisis, and as Joe points out about the Carter era, Jimmy Carter was destroyed politically by high gas prices, inflation, and the hostage crisis in Iran. There's a weird echo in my brain. We could end up in that same situation for Trump and the Republicans going into 26 and maybe even beyond, because and I don't want this to happen, folks, God forbid, I pray this won't happen, but combat is combat, and bad shit happens, and planes break and get shot down, and people take a wrong turn down a road during a military operation, and they get captured. Things go wrong. And the Iranians understand how to use media and social media to turn that into the only story in the universe. And Trump...
Yeah, that would drive Donald Trump absolutely.
Trump has a feral understanding of television and media. He recognized, and this is my theory of the case, why he put so much into this weekend. It wasn't just because he wanted to save the air crew. It was because he knew if they got a hostage, he was done. His numbers, if they got a hostage, his numbers will be in the mid-teens by next week. It will go so south for him. And I'm not saying this out, to praise the mullahs, but the Iranians are a sophisticated people. They are not Iraq. They are not Afghanistan. They understand media, social media. I mean, you've seen all these Lego propaganda videos. They're fighting it out with Trump on social media everywhere else. They're not stupid. They're playing a game that is required now in modern warfare, which is that you have a front that is in social media and in earned media and in communications, not just in the battlefield itself. And if they get a hostage or they get more than one hostage, we are in for a sea change in the climate of how people view this war. It's already more unpopular than Vietnam was in 1973. It can go bad. It can get worse.
Their use of social media reminds me of how the Ukrainians used it against Russia at the beginning of the war. They were very adroit about it. They were clever. They really went out and framed this as David versus Goliath, which it was.
Yep.
So, but they just dominated social media. And I think the United States posting these really stupid sort of like Call of Duty like style trailer
video game. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I think that falls in the category of the people who already like you like that. But part of communication is to reach people who want to hear a message that they're not receptive to otherwise. And I just don't think that would resonate with those people. What independent voter sees one of those Call of Duty things and looks at Pete Hegseth with this absurd sort of, flag, handkerchief, tie,
right, hair gel.
hair. I mean, the guy looks like, sort of failed Rush chairman. And he's just like, great, I'll follow that guy into hell,
Can we get to Vance for a second, though, guys? I'd really like
to. Yeah. So as you folks probably know, that J.D. Vance, who is a member of the Putin ring of the Republican Party, is right now in Hungary, cheerleading the dictator of that country, Orban, because Trump and Bannon and a whole bunch of American political consultants are over there working for Orban. He is 17 points behind in the polling right now against Peter Magyar of the TISA party, or the Fidesz party, excuse me. Orban's party is the TISA party. And we're watching American political figures, including the vice president and the president on speakerphone, campaigning for an authoritarian dictator in Eastern Europe who is a Putin ally of the First Order. Let's talk that through, guys, because I find it astounding.
Yeah, no, it's as if Nixon went over and to say Budapest, or after they rolled tanks in the fifth, and said, "This is great. We're supporting the Soviet Union." Or went into Hungary, went into Czechoslovakia, said, "We're on the side of the Soviet Union." And there's just something again that is particularly sick about J.D. Vance, because one of Orban's traits is he gave his famous speech in 22 that said that we want to preserve the purity of the blood in Europe, right. Which was so over the top. He had cabinet members, or what their equivalent of cabinet members, resign. Which you got to figure, if you're already in Orban's cabinet,
right? You're pretty immune to that sort of genocide talk.
You didn't come out of like the far left Brotherhood Rainbow Coalition, and so look at J.D. Vance's family. They're exactly what Viktor Orban is campaigning against. And of course, after he said this, CPAC invited him to come be their featured speaker. Like, oh, good, man, he's in the purity of the blood. We got to get that dude. One of us. And there's just something about that is so sick. Like his opposition to the 14th Amendment, which his wife wouldn't be a citizen if it wasn't for the 14th Amendment.
Right.
But, it is for those of us, Rick, who joined the party around Reagan, tear down this wall, all of this is just the complete denial that the party ever really believed in that shit.
Utterly. Absolutely.
Someone just said we're in a war and Vance is out campaigning for Orban. He's the interesting thing to me. I want to see how Vance straddles the 26% of Americans who are in his party who all think it's just perfect right now on the war, Goldilocks, and the 14% who thinks no, it's not far enough. We got to go harder.
Well, let's be very clear. I spoke to a reporter today who was checking in on me, and I was told Vance's team has continued this entire war to leak all the stories about, Vance is uncomfortable with the war. He's not sure about it. He was a voice of restraint in the room, all that crap. I'm sorry. J.D. Vance does not have the political skill, I don't think, to navigate out of this, guys. I don't think he's got the political chops to escape from the radiation of the, and I maybe shouldn't use the word radiation because we may have to deal with that soon, to escape from the radiation of this problem. I don't think he's got the political skill to do that.
Yeah. it's, you know, I keep going back to, Rick. I sometimes find myself asking, like, what would I do if I was a Republican consultant? And I really don't know what the fuck I'd do. I mean, what subject do you change it to? You try to change it to come out winning. I don't. The economy.
He's pinned on the economy. He's not going there. He can't, guys. Right? I mean, there's no world where he gets back on the economy.
No. And
it's got to be cultural stuff, right? It's got to be.
Yeah, it's got to be trans and Antifa and college sports and bathrooms and abortion and God knows what else.
Yeah,
but I don't think that works.
No, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. I think people are. I mean, particularly with the independent. I mean, that's what I'm saying. When you look at that poll that you were showing, that one question alone, you look at the independents and they're gone. And then, like I said, you look at the split in the Republican Party. 2-1, not far enough, and about right, because there's not too many of them in the gone too far. I mean, I know we have some, influencers are in the gone too far point of view, but I'm not sure there's many.
Well, when you got John Bolton in the gone too far category, that's a whole new universe.
Yeah, exactly.
I think though, I think one of the things that I'm really sort of contemplating is Democrats sometimes really want to talk about issues close to their hearts when the economy is not tuned into that. We've seen it a couple times before where it's like they want to talk about climate, but the economy's bad and people can't put gas in their car. And so it comes across flat. It falls flat. But right now, Trump is going to want to talk about anything else. And there's no world where with gas at $5-6 a gallon. And by the way, Brent crude today, folks, was at $144 a barrel. Brent is 144. Brent is a live barrel, as they say. That's actual physical oil. It's not a futures contract. That's physical barrel of oil delivered. That calculates, if you run the math, to something like $6.45 a gallon gas. Yeah. If that's what's happening in this country, if you're a Republican, I would just head for the hills. I would just take your campaign money and go to Bolivia because you're done.
What's fascinating about that is the actual cost today. And you look at the futures and they're like around 109. I mean, they're just not, it's still that normalcy bias. The entire market, the way it responded today with the news of Pakistan was like, wow, okay, we're out of this. It's just that bias is just so ingrained even in the market, because there's no way at 144 today, if you're placing a future bet for tomorrow, it shouldn't be where it's at. It's going to keep moving higher.
So I have an email today or a text message today from a really, really longtime good friend of ours, donor and supporter, big supporter of LP, who understands the energy markets like crazy. And she sent this to me today. The short-term energy outlook does not anticipate a price drop in gas until mid to late 2027. This is from the EIA, which is the government's own energy economics modeling shop. Process those numbers, guys. Do not expect a drop in the price of gas until mid to late 2027. And she knows this stuff backward and forward like nobody else. And shout out, Randy. She sent this to me and I read through the whole thing and I was just like, this changes politics going into 28 too. Yes. I mean, the scars of Trump's mistake of this war are going to echo through 27 as the Republican primary starts to heat up, as the party starts to see the end of the line for Trump, as they start to wonder where they're going to go, how they're going to divide themselves up. You got a party that's cheerleading genocide, that is campaigning with the worst human beings in the world, that has started a war with no purpose, no strategy, no end game, no objectives that are clear. They change by the minute. and that a war that will go on now. Just so we're all clear about Iran, everybody who's watching, we may stop being at war with them, but they will never stop being at war with us.
That how it works? That like the other side?
Yeah, the Iranians have Persia, Afghanistan, graveyard of empires, that whole thing.
Yeah.
They're never going to stop killing us because of this.
Yeah, I thought, what was it? I was listening to an interview with McChrystal, and he was saying, so their logic is, they're talking about the son of the supreme leader who's dead now, and said, so the logic is, okay, we blew you up apparently, and you're in some kind of bad
Killed his
shape.
wife and son.
Killed your wife, your son, some other family members. But look, dude, let's make a deal. He goes, I don't know if I would react that way. I'm not sure. Like that would be my first, like, oh man, yeah, let's sit out.
Yeah, this is not. And again, I mean, I just feel like the consequences of this are going to have longer repercussions. In a way, like the end of Watergate. It knocked on for a few years after 74. It still had a big.
Yeah,
I think I will, because the knock-on effect of Vietnam and Watergate lasted until 1980, even though those were 1974.
Yeah,
the knock-on effect here, and the trillions of dollars that are moving out of the Gulf right now. We've wrecked our alliances in the Gulf. Well, Iran, and look, if Trump does bomb Iran back into the Stone Age, the mullahs could not be happier. You know why? AK-47s don't need electricity. You know why? Toyota Hilux pickup trucks don't need electricity. They can charge their bullhorn on the cigarette lighter in the truck. They don't need the civilization that we think they need to be happy with their control over the Iranian people. It's so sad, because this really did set back the liberation of the Iranian people by 100 years.
Yeah, an Israeli friend, in that dark Israeli humor way they have, sent me a text message that said, I'm glad to see the United States is dedicated to the idea that if you're on a plane and you're Israeli and you're American and you're taken hostage, it's hijacked by Arabs, that they're going to ask for the Americans first. So that's well done. Maybe
bravo.
At the heart of this, you're really getting something there, Rick. It's just a lack of respect for another civilization, for another culture, for another country. I mean, Iran is an extraordinary country. And even with this, barbaric leadership, it's a huge country, a history of deeply educated, entrepreneurial people. I mean, look at the Iranians in Los Angeles. I mean, they hugely entrepreneurial and ambitious. They run Southern California almost. I mean, it's they're phenomenally successful, and with great pride in their national identity, their cultural identity. It's just such a miscalculation.
If we want, I spoke to a former senior intelligence guy. He said, somebody one time floated this idea that if we could get unrestricted internet access in Iran, the government would fall in a week. Because we looked at it, we thought about it, and now it doesn't matter. The mullahs have told that 90 million people in Iran, the great Satan hates you, and now the great Satan is bombing bridges, and we're promising to reduce their civilization to ashes. I don't know. I feel pretty great Satan-y right now. I don't think this is going to go. I don't think. No, I was joking this morning. I've actually read the 1945-46 U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey of Europe in my nerd way, and it concluded. And folks, we dropped more tonnage. We were the pound for pound all-time world champs of dropping bombs on Europe. No question about it. Millions and millions and millions and millions of bombs, millions of missions, or hundreds or thousands of missions. And we concluded after all of that, nothing we did ever broke away the Nazi party from the German people.
Yeah,
didn't help.
I don't think that like any American or British leader was particularly popular the week after we firebombed Dresden.
No.
I mean, it wasn't like they go, okay, we get it, you know.
Yeah.
Any more than it worked for the Nazis bombing London, the Blitz.
Correct. We determined, and we studied this very carefully after World War II, and it was not only like studying what we dropped the bombs on and what we did. We went and interviewed the Germans. Right. We talked to thousands of German citizens, and they were like, "Yeah, it was sad, it was depressing, it was horrible, but you know, Hitler was in charge. That was my country." Did it help break the German war machine? Absolutely. We've done that part already with Iran, at least somewhat. Yeah. We reduced a lot of their immediate industrial capacity. But we have not, the Iranian people, God, they deserve to be free, and I wish they were, but we've given the mullahs the tools to hold them hostage for 100 years. It's sad.
Yeah, it's incredibly tragic. Yeah, just on a human level.
Yep.
Which no one in this administration ever seems to think about.
Oh no, these guys are, go back to that video game, right? It's a video game to them. It's just a video game. But so I don't know, guys. I mean, what else do we have in the docket here? Sam, what else do we have on the production side that I haven't brought up yet? Because my short-term memory today is concerned about, nuclear war. Oh, we have elections. Let's bring up the election stuff.
Right.
Bring that up, Sam.
Centers.
We've got elections.
You were right on all of those.
Yeah.
A year ago, people would say to me, "Hey, Senator, do you think there's going to be free elections in 26 and 28?" And I kind of blew it off. A year later, I am terrified that this administration is going to try to create some incident that can allow federal intervention. We've seen the president already say, he wants the feds to take over, or Republicans to take over elections. We've heard his former Secretary of National Homeland Security say, we want the right people to vote for the right people. We have seen.
Yeah, I was one of the people back in the day telling him that I was really worried about whether we're going to have elections in 26 and 28 when he wasn't terrified. So it's good to see that
it's all your fault.
He's a great, Mark Warner's a great, I think one of the best we've got in there. And for him to say that, because he's so careful about, about the committees he sits on and what he knows, he's got intelligence, he's got, classified, briefings all the time. And so for him to say that, I just think is something every American needs to hear and understand.
So Rick, war game is out for me. How would this play out, do you think?
So the president declares a national emergency, saying that Iranian terrorists have been discovered in the U.S. and starts trying to rev up an ICE witch hunt of them. They don't exist. They're like Antifa. They're an idea. They're a fantasy. And he's going to have to start soon. And the tell will be, they'll say, we're worried that Americans are going to be victims of terrorist attacks by Iranians this fall at elections. That's where the Iranians want to attack our freedom. But it's really Trump attacking our freedom. That'll be the tell. If they start saying that.
Well, they're saying it. Vance is already out there saying that both, Iran,
he said Iran and Ukraine are attacking our elections.
Yeah, he's already doing this in Hungary when he's campaigning for Orban. He's saying that Ukraine and Iran are attacking the Hungarian elections and the U.S. elections.
Right.
They're already fertilizing that soil with those ideas. They're doing it.
But I think, like I said, if you're going to war game it out, it's going to be Trump will say, we have evidence the Iranians are going to attack polling places. Therefore, we have to secure them now. Yeah. We have to make sure they don't have that voter ID is mandatory to keep out the Iranian pipe bombers or terror bombers or vest bombers. And I think that also will lead to Trump demanding or seeking or getting more surveillance of American citizens, of our phone records, of our movements, of our social media posts. He will start categorizing people as, pro-Iranian sympathizers if they're not sufficiently up about the war. I think there's a lot of ways that we are seeing the earliest moments of it. But I do think it takes time for them to sink this into the minds of their base. They need their base to be scared first. But if they get them there, they get them there. And, this is an administration very famous for floating trial balloons. I'll tell you the trial balloons that really scare the crap out of me right now. 2 times out of the White House today, they said, while the president has the right to use nuclear weapons in Iran, he's not currently considering it. Which means he's currently fucking considering it. Which the ultimate transgression in the world is that. I've got a piece coming out tomorrow about this where I don't, if you think the economy in the world has gone upside down now, folks, the living will envy the dead economically if he does this. It will go so wrong, so bad, and the world will be so dark for a long time. Yeah, I'm not saying he's gonna, but I'm saying he's not gonna.
So why wouldn't Putin follow suit immediately? Exactly.
Why wouldn't he light up Kyiv that minute?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't China light up Taipei that minute?
Yeah.
It's so bad.
Yeah, I thought one of the points of which there is no coming back from is go back to the 2016 primary Republican debate when Hugh Hewitt asked Trump about the nuclear triad, and it was
Trump had no clue what the triad was.
Donald Trump thought it was like some hot threesome with models. If you go back and you read that exchange, and it is so disgraceful if you're listening to this, Hugh, that you continue to support that person. And it shows just like you really never believed in anything. And so now what do you have? You have this war and you have the president that you supported talking about possibly using nuclear weapons. Well done, dude. Well done.
It is, folks, we're in for a ride tonight. We've got about 2 hours to go before we'll start hearing if they've pulled back or if they're going to go ahead and go more kinetic this evening. Let's hope for the former, and if we've got the latter, it's going to be a very dark week. So, but with that cheerful note, we'll see you guys again next Tuesday for more hijinks, frivolity, and recipes for radioactive mutant rats.
And your online iodine pills.
Right.
Yes, we'll be having a
Remember, folks, the fallout passes in 72 to 96 hours. Then you can come out of your bunker. All right, everybody. Have a great night. We'll see you soon.
Thanks. Take care, everybody.